The Getaway is a neat artifact of its time in a couple of ways. It is also a permanent reminder that shameless advertising has been an important revenue stream for our favorite corrupt multinational conglomerate that happens to dabble in consumer electronics since at least 2002. I have seen it, maybe you have too. Sony loves to cram in as much product placement in their movies as possible. I thought this was a semi-recent addition to their business model, but I thought like an idiot. Within an hour's worth of spinning in the PlayStation 2's disc tray, the Getaway bombards your visual connection to this beautiful world with a deluge of advertisements. I first noticed this when I plowed a car into a FedEx van. By the way, this video is now brought to you by FedEx for manipulating free advertising out of me. FedEx will now use this opportunity to share its corporate views with you. FedEx believes that throwing water balloons full of urine at people and buildings is a great way to vent your frustrations. FedEx wants to reintroduce child labor camps and market them as career-building workshops. FedEx endorses vehicular homicide and the criminal underworld. If you look real close, you can also see Burger King stores lining the streets of the Getaway. Maybe if I was arsed to get out and explore the digital streets of London up close, I'd see even more bleakly colored buildings whose monotony is interrupted by what are coincidentally and completely unintentionally brightly colored representations of real businesses. Actual automobile companies and their creations are the most obvious bits of product placement, since you'll be staring at their taillights for driving segments that drag on for eternities. Hey, this driving section should have ended 20 minutes ago, but look at that Range Rover logo. Don't you want one? You want one. You know you want one. No down payment. 0% introductory APR. Good credit, bad credit. No credit? You're pre-approved. Drive off the lot today and get a coupon for a free Whopper value meal. I do my best to avoid passing judgment on a game before I played through a comfortable majority of it, but I cannot rationalize away this conclusion. The Getaway is a game caught between two worlds, and this reality is easy to see before even a fraction of the story is complete. Immediately, you are drawn in by an opening scene with high-quality voice acting and the beginnings of a visceral plot involving spousal murder, child kidnapping, and organized crime. From the developer perspective, The Getaway is a love letter written in code to the multitudes of excellent British crime films. Sony staples its own sloppily written love letter right in front of it with declarations of its vile affections to Mammon. It is tempting for a company to pay for production costs with advertising, and I lack a strong argument against this practice's inherent ethical shortcomings, but I have a strong hunch that Sony's pursuit of high profit margins directly affected The Getaway's final design choices. Cutscenes with great cinematic sensibility, meticulously recreated London streets, and dozens of faithfully rendered vehicles. Taking such positive attributes into account, no one could blame the developers of slapping together a second-rate Grand Theft Auto clone. I have vivid memories of reading previews and reviews of The Getaway on all the popular video game websites around the time of its release, and GTA was the game to which most comparisons were made. It's a barely justified observance. The Getaway's digital London is huge and has an open-world feeling because of its stature. I say feeling because the mission structure is not like Grand Theft Auto in the least. Every objective is presented rather linearly, rendering The Getaway's huge map unnecessary and detrimental to overall quality. The Getaway's existence began in the year 2000 as a game for the first PlayStation. It's unclear whether the lead designer originally had something even resembling an open world in mind, but even in its nascent stages, The Getaway reportedly featured faithfully replicated London streets by the few accounts that exist of it during this period. At the very least, we know that the development team included this aspect in the final product despite delays into the next console generation. Rendering a contemporary depiction of London was definitely a high priority, but the development staff could have accomplished this in tandem with more efficient level design. The Getaway's London is huge, you cannot take that away from it, but the size creates often meandering driving sections. Someone must have noticed this flaw in development. Someone had to have suggested that this project take on a structure to resemble a game like Max Payne. That game moved a lot of units, it's about organized crime, it has a similar story, and it's linear. Someone must have known that The Getaway would sell on the basis of its premise as opposed to technical similarities with Grand Theft Auto, but Sony probably stepped in and said, nah, if the player drives around more, they'll see more ads. You could say that product placement is truer to reality. Brands are a part of everyday life in England and the world at large. I can't argue with that, but you can't argue with this. The Getaway features a graphic depiction of torture, more graphic than a similar scene in Reservoir Dogs. The camera moved away from Michael Madsen as he cut off that guy's ear. You never actually see the poor sap getting maimed, but I bet you that FedEx and Burger King weren't ringing Lawrence Bender's phone off the hook for a product placement in that movie. But what can you do? The culture gives corporations all the perks of personhood with none of the drawbacks. A corporation can promote this kind of stuff all the livelong day while their human resources department forces you to watch embarrassing videos about workplace violence, harassment, and how even the faintest hints of opinions expressed contrary to the zeitgeist schizophrenic sexual mores will be met with termination, character assassination, and blackballing. It's really basic and lazy to point out hypocrisies, but the gap between the words and actions of ordinary slobs like me and you are bereft of even remotely comparable consequences. We don't have a stronghold on billions and billions of dollars. We don't make decisions with that money. Decisions which have global cultural implications by virtue of the financial scale backing them. FedEx has that power, Burger King has that power, Sony has that power. Legions of companies that have nothing to do with the Getaway have that power. They use that power with the utmost irresponsibility. But don't let my 82-minute tangent about capitalist exploitation and hypocrisy spurred by monotonous driving segments in a video game cloud your opinions of my opinions. The vehicular portions of this game are long and tedious, but driving is technically competent, probably more so than the gunplay. The cars actually manifest their damage in realistic ways. Hit something hard enough and your car will start to sputter and veer off in random directions. Driving's only flaw is boredom, but Mission 7 nearly turned me against the entire game. This mission removes the boredom, but replaces it with large doses of frustration. Cops are chasing you, triads are chasing you, and it's really hard to complete. The Getaway's difficulty was reasonable and steady in the 6 missions leading up to the 7th, but I'm sure this one soured a lot of players on the whole game. Fight through the struggles and you will be rewarded with cutscenes and more forgiving gameplay. Still, beating this mission was almost not worth the time and irritation for such a payoff. If you are not driving, you are running and shooting. Like a big old dummy, I first believed that the free aim function was the only way to squeeze them gats till they go click, click, click. The copy I dug out of the trash did not have an instruction manual, and the Getaway has no tutorial. Someone had to tell me about auto-aim, so thanks someone, you know who you are. Auto-aim works well, but has problems when enemies are abundant. This function often failed to direct my gunfire to the nearest enemy, resulting in very avoidable death. There's not much in the way of self-reference here. The Getaway aims for a more cinematic experience and thus downplays its medium's qualities. A heads-up display is non-existent, emphasizing these cinematic attributes. No aiming reticles, no minimaps. If you're driving, vehicle blinkers indicate the needed direction of travel. That's a neat idea that enhances immersion. I still prefer in-game maps, but this was a concept worth exploring. Instead of health packs, you lean against a wall for a few seconds to recover your health. Damage manifests as bloodstains, which fade as you heal. Going back to the few screenshots of the Getaway's PlayStation 1 iteration, we can see that the Getaway used to have some kind of heads-up display. This would indicate that creating an experience akin to a movie was something conceived of later in the game's gestation period. The Getaway's gunplay didn't do anything to erase Max Payne or Kill Switch from my memory. It's completely utilitarian with mechanics that meet minimum quality requirements for an action game. Everything is designed around the story. Seeing the next twist turn and the cutscene which delivers it is the primary motivation for playing through. It's hard to say that the Getaway's running and gunning has aged poorly because I'm not sure that it was good when it was new. That being said, it's not bad. Killing is easy, but the button to roll and evade is the same button that puts your back against the wall. If you're in a shootout with multiple bad guys in a confined space, you will likely experience accidental deaths as a result of this overlap. Your enjoyment of the Getaway will hinge entirely on your tolerance of long driving segments and basic combat mechanics. I don't want to complain about a game that provides a lot of content. This one is of reasonable length, but I have thoroughly whined about how long it takes to complete the driving missions. Even some of the on-foot stuff lasts too long, so the Getaway could have afforded to cut its runtime. I'm not too big on video game plots, but I like the Getaway's story. It's about crime, nothing fancy required. Mark Hammond is the focus of the first half of the game. You follow his journey to get his kidnapped son back from the criminal overlord responsible for that and his wife's death. Hammond has a troubled past and wants to leave it behind to raise a family, but he's blackmailed into committing crimes which sow artificial discord among London's racially segregated gangs. You meet a cop named Frank Carter during Hammond's portion of the game, and you eventually take control of the quote law unquote man, where you get to experience his side of the story. The Getaway's pacing improves considerably when following Carter. This is where the game could have been real lazy, but there are a lot of cutscenes and intense gunfights. The action is a lot better when you compare it to the first half of the game. Its story doesn't get the mileage that it does out of following Hammond, being that much of it has already taken place from his perspective. Still, Carter has a satisfying campaign that I was happy to see all the way through. The Getaway has problems, and it is a reminder that corporate hypocrisy is a redundant statement. I don't think I'll ever play it again, but there's a good story with bits of pertinent social commentary. Playing the Getaway was worth my while, but only by a slim margin.